Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. See how Uber is helping Canadians get to their medical appointments with Hope Air at uber.com/hopeair.
CHEK Podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. I'm your host, Rob Shaw. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for subscribing to the audio Political Capital Daily, for watching us on YouTube or CHEK TV or CHEK Plus. We appreciate you stopping in to check in on BC politics. The Pod Squad is here to break down the stories of the week. Angelo, Isidorou, Executive Director of the BC Conservative Party; Jeff Ferrier, longtime BC New Democrat strategist; and Jillian Oliver, longtime BC Green strategist. Thank you so much for being here. We got lots to talk about, so we might as well jump right into it. The Prime Minister was in town, Mark Carney, in British Columbia, to unveil the sort of long-awaited federal BC housing deal. It comes a couple months after Ontario got their influx of federal cash. The highlights: $5 billion in federal money, cost shared by BC in some areas. Part of it's designed to get municipalities to lower development cost charges that they use to fund sewer and water and road infrastructure. It is not quite the deal that Ontario got. I'm not sure what the public reaction will be. I'm not sure if it's a good deal, although it's money. So I guess we'd start going around on that. Jillian, good deal, good money, good optics here. How do you think all of this landed?
Well, it's still missing quite a lot of detail, and it remains to be seen how effective it is. We know for sure that about 2,000 unsold condo units are going to be getting bought up and turned into affordable housing. I mean, I think every unit of affordable housing that we can get is good, but still that's a drop in the bucket in terms of the supply that's needed. And the provincial government had to make big cuts to its community housing fund. I don't think this gets to that level of those plans, of what they were planning to do before they had to make those cuts. And then the rest of the cost of infrastructure and the lack of infrastructure has been the sticking point for municipalities, as the province has been trying to induce them to densify and make it easier to build. So I think that that's good, and hopefully that's going to sort of grease the wheels as we've seen a real slowdown in housing starts, as the cost of materials and the economy has slowed. But just how much more building will come out of this, I think, remains to be seen. There's a risk, I think, that this money disproportionately goes to sort of just enrich developers. It'll be interesting to see if the government puts any safeguards in. I think, after all, there was a huge housing boom in terms of building in our major cities and major areas, while the costs just continue to spiral out of control. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of, there's details that we don't know, Angelo. Then there's kind of that question that Jillian just raised. If you convince municipalities to lower development cost charges by maybe up to $40,000, do people see those savings, or does it become like one of those, the federal excise gas tax, where it just like gets gobbled up and people don't even see it? There's a lot of questions about what this actually means, I think.
And do you compensate municipalities? Do they find savings elsewhere? Are municipalities even at the table, right? I mean, the devil is really in the details of what has been announced. It was a big announcement. It was a positive announcement. But as we know, historically, municipalities have been left behind in these discussions. And furthermore, BC has been left behind. Ontario got a much better deal. And I think it's part of a larger pattern that we're seeing, where the federal government seemingly doesn't have a terrific relationship with this premier, because it feels like BC is continuously left behind. So we don't have enough information to go off of. I mean, you said money is good. Money is good. Money is great. It's always nice to have money, but ultimately you want to look at what others are getting, and you also want to see how this is all actually going to work when you have to work with municipalities across the province.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, what did you think of all this?
Yeah, I think Jillian makes good points about the technical importance of this, about the money to municipalities for infrastructure, the money for healthcare. I think she touched on something that was quite important, that I think it makes this a political minefield, And it's that many British Columbians are going to see this as the condo to homes part, as governments bailing out developers who made bad business decisions. Developers built tiny condos at prices many people couldn't afford. The market changed. No one wanted them. And now taxpayers are being asked to clean up the mess. And so the fairness question is obvious. Why should families struggling to buy a home subsidize people who got rich building them? Carney and EB will argue they're saving housing projects and creating affordable homes, and they are. Their challenge is convincing voters they're helping families and not rescuing wealthy developers.
It's a good point, and it's an interesting one because like this package seems more geared to developers in the development industry, and Jeff, you just touched on it. They're buying up these 2,500 unsold condos to get them off the market. In Ontario, the deal centered around eliminating the 13% HST on new home purchases up to $1 million. And the Prime Minister was able to say that's going to save $130,000 on a home purchase. And that has, in the first month, apparently supercharged the housing sector in Ontario. That is not what BC wanted. And the Premier said basically that, that because various reasons that PST isn't charged on homes here, that there's already a first-time homebuyer exemption on HST and the property transfer tax, that BC didn't want that. But those are first-time homebuyers. In Ontario, it's any new home buyer. So let's just go around on that. Like, I think is a week from now, a month from now, is anyone in BC, any voters going to be talking about this thing? Is it a win for anyone, or is it a number salad? Is it going to, like, it feels like a lot of, it doesn't get the punch that Ontario got in the real world, where there's this buzz over this HST holiday. I don't know if people are going to care, I guess. Jeff, let's stay with you and go around again.
Yeah, I think that we want to be practical about what Ontario got here. It's for new homes only. That's the only people who pay HST. It's not for resale homes, and it's for people whose homes are under $1 million. So if you're in the lower mainland, good luck finding that kind of home, unless it's a small vacant condo that are being turned into affordable housing because no one wants them. So I think BC on the technical side got a good deal, adding housing stock, responding to mayor's concerns around infrastructure, getting money into healthcare to help communities grow. But as I said, the big challenge is going to be if this is seen as a sop to developers rather than something that's meant to help families.
Yeah, Angelo, the question of whether anyone's going to care, but then also, and Jeff just touched on this, somehow there's healthcare money in here. I don't know where that came from. There's some money for transit. Ontario did get some money for light rail. BC gets some SkyTrain money, no money for the Massey. But is anyone going to be talking about this in a week or a month? Is anyone going to care, do we think, in the sort of that real voter world?
I think in our political culture, there's an oversaturation of housing announcements. And what I mean is that for a lot of people who pay attention, it feels as though there's a ton of announcements around housing in multiple levels of government and different types of government in different parties. And it doesn't feel like it's doing anything. It doesn't feel like anything actually changes. And this feels like that type of an announcement. You noted Ontario and how the market is supercharged now in Ontario as a result of removing the tax. That's something tangible. It's something real. In this case, if I'm a young person looking to buy a home, this doesn't exactly scream confidence. It doesn't inspire me. It doesn't really tell me much of anything other than sort of corporate word salad. Mm-hmm. So I'm not terribly optimistic.
Corporate word salad and a bunch of numbers spread out over 3 years and 10 years and cost match. We didn't even ask how the BC government's going to afford to cost match some of this. I think it's like $2.5 billion, and it doesn't have any money, but it's spread out over so many years. Maybe it'll find it. Jillian, is anyone going to care? Ontario, everyone's happy. BC, a shrug maybe?
Yeah, a bit of a different deal. I think if there are going to be tangible benefits from this, they'll be further down the road. specific housing projects, perhaps with the money for infrastructure coming directly from government will have more of a lever to build the types of homes that people want. I think that's something that people could notice in a couple of years if we see more projects that actually like suit people's needs in terms of where they want to live, instead of like a 400-foot cookie cutter shoebox like we see that are not selling in Vancouver. But I think that's why you also saw the government sprinkle in some things like the Tumbler Ridge School, some stuff that is going to be a little bit more tangible, a little bit more headline grabbing to sort of communicate to people that these are real projects that mean something, because I think they know that this is a bit more of a sort of complex technical agreement than what Ontario got.
Yeah, it certainly gives the BC government another step of kind of influence over municipalities. So not only does it have housing targets and change the law and public hearings and zonings, now it's got the ability to help pay for some infrastructure money with the feds if they lower development cost charges. There's a lot of like influence that the province continues to have on housing. But let's take a quick break there. When we come back, we're going to talk about new polling numbers from Angus Reid and break those down coming up after this. Well, welcome back. Another week, another poll in BC politics, this time from Angus Reid, showing Premier David Eby last week with a national poll showing him the second least popular premier in the country. This week with a BC-specific poll. It's a bit of an odd one in the sense that the usual numbers we get, the top-level numbers from decided voters and their voter intention, we're kind of buried a little bit in this, but the numbers are 47% Conservative, 36% NDP, 11% Green, 6% other amongst decided voters. The more played up part of this from Angus Reid was the huge amount of undecided voters. And when you throw those in, you end up 33% Conservative, 28% undecided, 26% NDP, 7% Green, and then you kind of go on from there. So no matter how you cut it, and we'll start with you, Angelo, this is the Conservatives in the lead here again, and then another poll showing that. But huge block of undecideds that I guess Angus Reid wanted to emphasize here.
Yeah, I've said it many times before. There's a pool of British Columbians, a pool of voters who seek permission to vote for the Conservatives. They want change in government. It's been a decade of decline under the NDP, and they want that permission for change. And I think what the Conservatives need to do is give them that permission. The poll is very good for the Conservatives. In fact, it's the best poll I've ever seen, I think, at 47%. It's the highest the party has ever polled. You also have 60% of the province saying we're heading in the wrong direction. If you ask many pollsters, that to them is the golden sort of metric of changing government. Frankly, anything over 50% means bad news for the incumbent. The Conservatives are also ahead practically on every single demographic and in every single region, including Metro Vancouver. So I think it's an interesting poll. What's interesting about it as well is that the demographics. So the Conservatives are also doing very well with 55 plus and are still doing very well and are ahead with younger voters. In the 2024 provincial election, that was the other way around. So it's interesting to see a bit of an evolution on that. Older voters do tend to vote more. So really, I've said it once, I'll say it again, and it's a broken record. David Eby will very likely not be the premier in the next election. I think the NDP will likely pull a Trudeau and swap him out, but I could be wrong.
Well, you never know. I mean, this is the big question in BC politics right now that we're all asking. Jeff, these numbers, what jumped out at you for them?
Well, an 11-point lead makes for great headlines, and it's a clear yellow light for the NDP, but I'd pump the brakes a little bit. I've seen private polling that has the race within 3 points, so highly competitive. The real opportunity, I think, for Carrie-Lynne Finlay and all of this, there is an opportunity to build a Pierre Poilievre-style coalition of voters, angry folks on all sides of the political spectrum who feel the system is rigged against them. But here's the catch. Many voters, including some voting Conservative, like Carrie-Lynne Finlay less the more they see her. They don't see practical change from her. They see risky change. And as one smart pollster put it to me, it's echoes of the old Barry Goldwater problem. If you think she's too conservative, you're not alone. And I think the most important number isn't approvals or on the right track. I think it's whether people think it's time for a change in government. And the numbers that I've seen say that despite the Conservatives' momentum, surprising number of British Columbians still say, no, it's not time for a change. And until that changes, until folks feel more comfortable with Carrie-Lynne Findlay and the kind of politics that she's advancing. This is a competitive race, not a coronation.
Jillian, what do you think?
For me, it was interesting that Angus Reid decided to highlight the undecided vote because they have it showing as a bigger block than the NDP vote themselves. That's really remarkable and like not something I've ever seen in another poll. It could be an outlier. This has like a fairly small sample size for a provincial level poll, but it's a reputable pollster at the same time. So that's really interesting. And if they're accurate, it really tells me that there's a lot of people that don't trust either of the big two parties right now. And that vote is really up for grabs. And it's not a given that it's going to go to one or the other or split between the two. We saw in 2017 a very similar dynamic where the Greens reaped the benefits and ended up getting about almost 1 in 5 voters to vote for them because they were seen as sort of like a safe place to park your vote and a place where people who are really looking for MLAs that they could trust could put their vote. So we could see another party. We could see that go to the Greens, depending on how they play their cards. It really tells me that right now things are really up for grabs and a lot could change as we get closer to the election.
A lot of opportunity for, Carrie-Lynne Findlay and that undecided bloc to make a big impact depending on how she rolls out her early leadership. So interesting. And, these polls, we've seen them again and again. They kind of highlight trends, but caution putting too much into one individual poll, but certainly interesting. Okay, let's take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about energy and do we need a new Site E dam? It's an interesting question. We'll get into that just after this. Well, welcome back. The biggest, most ambitious file in the BC government right now, energy, with Energy Minister Adrian Dix making a bunch of announcements this week, trying to grow the amount of power in the province, conserve it, increase capacity. The big takeaway, the proposal here to investigate 2 new hydroelectric dams. We thought Site C was the end of that. Now we've got Site E. I don't even know what happened to Site D, so don't ask me. And also the Hamathko River project near Butte Inlet, 2 potentially massive projects in BC Hydro is now considering to meet demand, along with a whole bunch of other stuff from the energy minister all week. So what do we make of this file? Jeff, we'll start with you. It's a lot of money, and one day we're going to have to pay for it, but we also seem to need a lot of power, and hydroelectric dams are just, for a while there, they were like a lightning rod in the province politically. Is that still the case, or what do you think?
I love hydro dams. I think they're emissions-free, they're reliable, because the dams operate for generations. The cost gets spread over decades, so that helps keep hydro rates low over the long term. I think the uncomfortable truth is that BC should have started this conversation years ago. BC Hydro underestimated the amount of population growth, mining, LNG development, and electric vehicles. And it's not the political play of the week, but we won't have to worry about electric vehicles if Carrie-Lynne Findlay becomes premier, rather, because she's put out some social media saying that electric vehicle chargers are aggressive boutique ideology. So she's against them. Weird flex. But now we're racing to build the capacity we should have been planning for a decade ago. And good on Adrian Dix for leading on this, on something where BC Hydro dropped the ball.
On somebody, like, I've attended a lot of BC Hydro briefings over the years, and one thing is reliable, that they're never correct in their forecasts. They had called for too little power and then too much, and then they went back and forth, and you're right. But also hydro and its forecasting seems to be to blame for a lot of that. Angelo, what do you think?
Well, the first thing I'll say is what Carrie-Lynne Findlay was saying in her tweet was that there is a fundamental incongruence between the needs of the province and what are in fact boutique issues. You have EV chargers in downtown Vancouver being torn into pieces and stolen for copper wire. That to me points out a very, very big divide in where our priorities should be and what British Columbians are actually looking for right now. We have very, very serious issues that need to be addressed, like crime and safety. On the dam itself and on the upgrades, it's good to see Adrian Dix find religion on energy, particularly given that he lost his election on TMX. I think, the one thing I'll agree with Jeff on is that this is a long time coming. We knew we would need energy. we knew this would happen, and fundamentally the population is going to continue to skyrocket. So we need to come up with ways to meet those expectations.
Jillian, Site C was very controversial. The environmental groups didn't think it was safe or environmentally friendly power. I mean, it had to flood an entire area. Do we think the public views this in any different way? Do we expect it could be controversial to go back to dams, or have times changed, or what do you think of all that?
I think that things have changed. When Site C was being built, as you guys alluded to, the projections for power were much lower. That's since been revised. So now you see a lot more climate groups and clean energy groups, a lot more bullish on building power and understanding and on the same page about the vast need. Even with all of these projects, as well as the new wind projects that Adrian Dix has announced, we're still below what most clean energy experts think will be our need by 2050. So I think there is a bit more of a unified sort of consensus on the need to build clean power and the sort of trade-offs that come with it. On the dams themselves and the environmental impacts, it really is site specific with these types of projects. In the case of Site C, in addition to the First Nations opposition and the environmental damage, there was a lot of generational family farms that were affected. I'm not yet familiar with the areas in Site E that might be affected. I think those farms in Site C's case really were the lightning rod, because it really tugged at people's heartstrings that people's farms that have been in their families for generations are going to get flooded and destroyed against their wishes. So I think it really depends on how these move forward. We already saw a First Nation in one of the sites come out and say that they weren't consulted prior to the announcement, really upset that it went public without them being brought to the table. And so I think the government needs to tread very lightly, because as we saw with Site C, as we saw with TMX, that really drives up the price. And with the vast need for these projects, we really need to make sure that we're choosing projects that have consent, have partnerships. There's no shortage of First Nations and other groups that want to see clean, renewable projects go forward. So I think the government needs to be really strategic about what it prioritizes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very early days, and even laws, the Clean Energy Act, would have to be changed to allow for these dams. There's a lot that has to happen before government can get there. This is just the first step, as the energy minister put it, but no one is more active on any file in government right now, or spending more money than Energy Minister Adrian Dix, as he tries to get a handle on the power consumption and the forecast for the future. Okay, let's leave it there. Thank you to the panel for being here. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with all the latest in BC politics here on Political Capital. Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. See how Uber is helping Canadians get to their medical appointments with Hope Air at uber.com/hopeair.